All right, everyone. It appears that it is 12 o'clock Central Time. Time to get started. I want to welcome you to our webinar Wednesdays, sponsored by the Early Intervention Training Program from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Our topic today is going to be a recipe for success, partnering with families beyond early intervention visits. And our presenter today is Jen Newton, and Jen will give you an opportunity to kind of tell a little bit about yourself here in just a moment. But I want to go through some housekeeping things for folks that if you've never participated in a webinar before, then we will go through how you can do that. So I am Maria Maddox, as I said, and I am one of the moderators for today. And we also have Alyssa Jones here, who's also in the background helping us with any technical issues that we may have. So just know that we'll be all in the background if you need any assistance. So for those of you in Illinois, these trainings offer Illinois EI licensure credit and EI credit as well. You will get a survey, you'll get an email after today's webinar, and in that email will be a survey. If you complete the survey, you will get your certificate of completion within 24 hours. If you are sitting at a computer as a group, just make sure that you have registered so that you will get your individual email so that you can complete the survey. And I do believe Jen had shared that some other states have gotten credit for this as well, and so they will get a survey as well. So everyone who participates gets a survey. So just make sure you complete that for us. If you haven't ever participated in a webinar, let me just introduce you to your environment here. And our webinar is awesome. We get to participate wherever we're from, wherever we're located. So in the chat box, we were talking about how some folks are at home, some folks are in the office, some folks are in a coffee shop, some are parked in their car participating in the webinar, and that's the convenience of webinars. The downside to webinars is that you can't see us and we can't see you. And we know when we are dealing with communication with folks that visual communication that we have with each other plays a huge role. So we do what we can to compensate for that, and one of them is through some tools that we have on our webinar environment. So on your left-hand side of your screen, if you are on your computer, you should see a control panel, which has got your audio-video, your participant list, your chat box. If you're on a handheld, that should be below the screen itself. So it'll look a little different, but that's where those are. Now, we're going to use a couple of tools to demonstrate participation, and the first is the hand raise tool. So you will notice I've got it highlighted on the screen where it would be located on your specific devices. Our presenter today may ask you a question if you, let's say, you have ever been outside of your home state. Raise your hand. So, everyone who's been outside their home state before, raise your hand. Okay, so we can see if you can find that hand raise tool. Awesome, lots of travelers out there. That's pretty awesome. Okay, so you found it. So you click it once to raise your hand, click it again to lower your hand. Perfect, thank you so much. All right, another tool that we will use is the chat box. Now, the chat box is where you can go to say hey to friends that are logged on here, and also to identify any technical issues that you may be having. But also, this is where we want you to ask any questions that you may have. That as the presenter is presenting, you may have a question that pops in your head. Type it in right then. Don't wait. Type it in right then. And we have question blocks, question breaks built into our presentation. So if we haven't addressed it as our presenter is talking, we will definitely address it during those question breaks. So just a little caveat to that, if the question that you ask is going to be addressed later on in the presentation, we may not address it right then because we know we're going to get to it later. So if we get to a question break, and nobody has talked about your question, fear not, we'll get to it, okay? Also, the chat box is a great way to add any experiences that you've had, any strategies that that you're using that are working really well, or we all have those burn and learn. So if you've got anything like that you want to share, please do so. Please chat with us, communicate with us. This is your webinar, and we want it to be as meaningful and interactive as possible. All right, one final tool that we might be using is a polling function. So you can kind of see where that is on your screen. Now right now on the screen it looks like there's a checkbox. It's that fourth box under your name, or if you're on a handheld, under the whiteboard. But it will also change depending on the poll. So right now in your control panel it has an A in it. So it'll look either with the checkbox or an A. So we're going to run a little poll here just to see who all is with us today. So I have a poll up. Who do we have participating with us today? So if you click on that polling function, that fourth box, either under your name or under the whiteboard, open it up and then click on the appropriate response. Okay, we'll give folks a few seconds to do that. All right, we've got our motor therapist is option A. We've got our speech language pathologist is option B. We've got DTs is option C. Any CFC staff is option D. And then if you're an other, because we only have 5 options, please let us know. And it looks like we've got some supervisors, some program managers, parent liaison, Ohio EI developmental specialist, awesome. We've got some folks from EITP. We've got some professional counselors logging in. Jen, we got a lot of folks, a lot of different roles here. So awesome. I'm going to post, if we can we post results up so you all can see what we can see. So we've got quite a bit of others, which is really interesting. So we've got a lot of folks here. But it's a good mix of people. So we're going to run these polls a couple of different times, and if you would please be so kind as to respond using the polling function. That gives us as presenters an opportunity to kind of get a feel for who all is in our room and kind of check for understanding and things like that. Looks like we've got some folks from La Rabida, lots of different service coordinators in here. Awesome, welcome. All right, I'm going to clear this one out real quick, and we have another poll that we wanted to ask because we know that folks are participating from a variety of different locations. Earlier we were asking if you were at your home or your office. Now we kind of want to know like what state are you in? Because we know we've got a lot of different people that are participating from different states. So use your polling function. Again, it's that fourth box. Right now it has a little A in it. Click on it, and it'll open up your polling function, and you click on the appropriate response. Okay? So we've got a couple of different options here. Okay, give folks a few more moments to respond. It's really interesting for us as presenters to really see where folks are logging in from. All right, looks like we got, well, let's go ahead and post it up. So we've got folks from all over. Look at that. Several from, many from the eastern U.S., I mean just from all over the U.S. This is pretty awesome. And then I'm seeing some in the chat box as well. I'm just looking real quick to see if there's anybody outside the U.S. Every once in a while we'll get some folks outside the U.S. So looks like, yeah, Jen's wanting to know where our western U.S., Hawaii, or Alaska person is from, what state. Let us know. All right, Jen, that's our group. We've got a lot of different disciplines from all over the U.S., predominantly in Illinois, which is what I would expect. And with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and you can share a little bit about yourself and tell us all about partnering.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria, and thank all of you for your participation as we were getting oriented. I still want to know who is in Western U.S., Hawaii, or Arkansas, so come forward and identify yourself. Hi, I'm thrilled to be here with you. I'm Jen Newton. I'm currently an assistant professor of early childhood special education at Ohio University, and I'm super excited to see all my Ohio soon-to-be friends popping in on the chat. Tiffany, hi. I'm excited you guys are here, and I'm excited about our time together today. I wanted to give you a little background about the career and experiences that led me to where I am today so that you'll have a sense of kind of how I came to this work. I started my career in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I see we have some North Carolina folks on with us today as well. I lived in Winston-Salem and was an early interventionist in 2000. From there, I moved into an inclusive preschool program. At the time, North Carolina had what was known as More at 4, and I was a teacher in an inclusive More at 4 program in Winston-Salem and then in Raleigh. And then after the birth of my oldest daughter, I took on a role as a family educator, providing literacy supports for families whose children were enrolled in the district's More at 4. And that sort of in a circuitous way led to my entering into the special education doctoral program at the University of Kansas. I've been so fortunate to continue learning with and from families and EI providers all along the way, and now I get to be here learning from and with all of you about how we partner with families so that they are able to take what we do together on our visits and extend into the days, times, routines when we are not there. I want you to participate with me today. I want to hear from you in the chat box. We want you to kind of talk with us as we go today. So our plan, our recipe for today will be is in front of you. We're going to talk a little bit about family-centered practices. We're going to address our biases and beliefs about families. We'll talk about some strategies for extending beyond the visit. We will address routines and rituals that are unique and important to individual families. And then, as always, no recipe is complete without a little bit of care, a little trust in families and empathy, and we'll gently fold all of those things together. And when they're well mixed, what will we have? Any ideas? What does all of that get us? A beautiful unicorn cake, obviously. But far less elusive than unicorns, we can partner with families in ways that are truly family-centered and extend well beyond our time in families' homes and spaces. So are you ready to get started? Let's get a little hand raise if you're ready to get started. Show me your hand. So you guys are finding your button. Awesome. So let's start with a common definition for what we mean when we say family-centered practice. This is the definition from the Division of Early Childhood pulled from the recommended practices. Are you all familiar with the recommended practices? They are available with a glossary and other supplements for free on the Division of Early Childhood's website. So let's look at this definition together. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to read it and think of some of the key words that you see. Engagement is critical today, so pop into the chat box to share what jumps out at you in terms of key words for this definition. What words do you see? Dignity and respect, getting a couple of hits. Individualized, unique, flexible, family functioning, family, involved family members, unbiased, which is one of my favorites. Flexible, individualized choices, informed decisions, unbiased, involved, unique, flexible. There's a lot of really important words in this definition. These are the ones that I've circled that I see as keywords. What have I missed that you all said? Did you indicate anything? Family members. Some people said family members, which I think is also a critical word. I see strengthen, which I also thought was an important word. Do you see anything else that I'm missing that you guys love? Let's see. I think maybe decisions, informed decisions. Lois says informed decisions, and I think she's right. I just said informed, but the decisions is obviously a critical component of that. But first, we have to have all of our ingredients handy before we can begin any big project. Oh, I see Maria has put the recommended practices into the chat box. So if you're not familiar with the recommended practices, you can click that link and download them there. So as we're thinking about those words that we just talked about and what they look like in our practice, we have to agree on some foundational, non-negotiable key ingredients. These basic premises are the foundation of our recipe. We can add all the toys, all the empathy, all the engagement, all the services, all the support, but without these three critical components, we will not be able to say that we are truly family-centered. Did your grandma or mom or aunt, I'm not totally sure why I'm perpetuating gender stereotypes here with my baking theme. Did they have a magic ingredient for a family favorite recipe? Can anybody think of a family favorite recipe that had a secret ingredient or a magic ingredient? Love, says Patrick, and that is exactly it. These are our magic ingredients for truly family-centered practices. We have to believe that families love their children and want what is best for them. Love may look different for different families, but we have to believe that families love their children. Families get to determine their priorities and values. It's not my priorities and values, it's theirs. And there is no right way to raise children. There are lots and lots and lots of ways. So today we're going to start everything with this common understanding and build from there. Now that we agree on these three critical ingredients, we can go back to our key words of family-centered practice. Let's talk through the ways those ideas and priorities show up in practice. So these are all those words that we decided earlier were our key words. Now we're going to look at them with a little more depth. I decided to select a few of my favorite family-centered practices, words to guide our conversation together. We'll talk about what each word means to us and about how it looks in practice. We'll think about how it looks different for different kids and families. We'll see if maybe sometimes it looks the same. I'm not sure about that, but maybe you can show me how that is true. What does individualized mean in relation to family-centered practices? I know this is a big chunk of text. Take a few minutes to read this vignette.
While folks are reading, if you don't have it already maximized on your screen, please do so. That'll make it easier to read.
Have any of you ever had this experience with a child and family? That dreaded toilet training criteria for preschool?
Raise your hand if that's been one of your experiences.
Oh, it's so interesting. So I see some people have, some people haven't. Lael says that could be a cultural difference to take into consideration. It certainly could be. Cheryl says that they do accept non-potty trained kiddos at her child care center. So what are the unique needs of Leo and Leo's family? What may Leo's early intervention team focus on? How might they support his advancing? So there are cultural needs that we need to be clear about understanding. Is this a family priority? I see Jennifer and Amanda. And then we have to think about what strategies may the team employ in order to move Leo and his family toward their individual goals. So their goals are to have Leo advance at the child care center with his peers. So what are the steps that need to be taken? How can they help strengthen his skills, says Rose. And I think that is it. Is potty training a deal breaker for the early childhood center, or is it more about his skill set? And are there strategies and resources we can employ to more meaningfully include him? So is potty training the family's priority or the center's priority? So Patricia says he's already at the child care center, so they could begin a potty training there. It's the team, the centers. Okay, so we seem to have agreement that it's the center's priority. The family has not indicated it is theirs. Right. So Hannah says it's usually the family's responsibility, but the center wants it to be a priority. So whose individual needs are we meeting? And who gets to decide whose needs are the most important? I am a firm believer that fruit has no place in desserts. As a result of this, I never bake desserts with fruit. I need you to raise your hand if you're with me on this. Fruit is a health food. Dessert is delicious. These two things should not mix. Thank you, Tiffany. Nina, Sabrina, you're my people. Yes, we do not put, fruit pizza. I disagree, Rose. It's not dessert. That's fruit on the side, right? That's a health food. So are you wondering where I'm going with this? If the family does not care for or prioritize potty training for Leo right now, will they work on it at home? Nope. Nope. And it's really hard to potty train a child in one context, right? No, they're not going to work on it at home. And should we ask them to, if it's not their family's priority? I may make a fruity dessert for you when you come to visit me at my house, but I promise you I will not keep that going when you're not around. I'm going right back to chocolate. So how do we develop opportunities for families to be heard and their priorities to be the priorities of our team? What questions do you have so far? Rose is still coming at me with the fruit pizza. Rose, if you come to my house, I'll make you fruit pizza, but I'll never make it again unless you're visiting. What questions do you all have for me? Thoughts? Any burning moments that you want to share with us?
Type them in the chat box as they come to your mind, and we'll have other question breaks throughout the presentation for additional questions. So I don't see any, Jen, so I think we can move forward.
Awesome. Well, the same is true for families. They're not going to work on things that they don't do already in their routines just because we're asking them to. So let's talk about flexibility. That was another one of those key words in the recommended practices. So we're going to dive into flexibility now, and I'm hoping that we've established a new but optimistic relationship that allows you to move with me through this next part. Hear me out. Raise your hand if you're ready to move forward with an open and flexible mind. All right. So here we go. We're going to talk about toy bags. And we're going to talk about TVs and maybe cell phones and passies and maybe snack traps. These are all familiar things, right, that we all have strong feelings about. So my two youngest girls are very into competitive cooking shows. Have you ever watched one of those shows and thought, oh, I could definitely make that? And then you try and it doesn't work out exactly the way you imagined? It's still delicious. It's still cake after all, right? The proper dessert. But it's not perfect. I have a lot of cooking show people over here in the chat box. I need to know what your favorites are. This cake is kind of a nailed it. Cupcake Wars, yes. As are we and the families we work with. We are not perfect. When we show up with all of the ingredients and then take them when we go, how can families replicate our time together after we leave? Is it about the ingredients, or is it about the practice and the opportunity to try again and again? Is there anybody on the Food Network who made that cake perfectly the first time? How can we ensure that families have the resources that they need in order to do the work when we're not there? If we take it with us, they don't have all the ingredients. So let's talk about the strategies for extending beyond our time with families. The first is that we have to use what they have so they can use it too. Now, this is a place I want you to get in that chat box. Anything can be a toy. The rituals and routines of families are not ours to change. So share in chat some ways that you've utilized items in the home to engage families in supporting their child's development. What have you used in families' homes to help them engage their son? Toilet paper, paper towel rolls, noodles, swim noodles, or pasta noodles? Yep, Cheryl says use what they have so they have what they need. Yeah, kitchen pots and pans. Pudding, I want to know more about that. Cotton balls and straws, good one. A case of soda, box, rice, socks and towels, whatever the child is interested in. 2-liter bottles, empty water bottles are always a favorite. Boxes, siblings. Siblings is so important for modeling how inclusion works within families, right? Families are the most inclusive context we have. Laundry baskets, egg cartons, Tupperware containers. You can use everything, which is why we don't need to bring anything. Families have the resources that they need. We might have to modify. We might have to use applesauce in our recipe rather than using oil, but we can still achieve our same goals. Tin foil, I'm interested in that. I want to know more about that. Bubble wrap. Yeah, see, you guys have lots of great ideas about how you can use what families already have. We have to leave the things with the families that allow them to engage their children. Bubbles. Okay, this is Lin-Manuel Miranda's son, Sebastian. He's on stage in Hamilton in Puerto Rico. So I need you to raise your hand if you're a Hamilton fan. Any Hamilton fans out there? Just a few. So I do want to know if you are a fan, but please do not type in chat that you've seen it. Because like I said, we're new friends now, and I don't want to feel envious of you. Thank you, Jennifer and Lisa, for telling me that you haven't seen it yet. I haven't either. I'm entering the lottery every day in Cleveland, Cincinnati. I'm going to get there, but I haven't seen it yet, so don't tell me you have. We're new friends. I want to keep it that way. When I saw this picture, that Lynn posted on Twitter, I immediately thought of family-centered practices and how they look different, individualized and unique for different families. Maybe Sebastian goes to bed later since he's at the show with his family. What may be some of the toys that Sebastian and his baby brother are playing with while they're on the road with their family for Hamilton's stint in Puerto Rico? Can you tell me in chat what might be some of the things they're experiencing? Musical. It's next to impossible to get tickets. Yes, it is. It's a disaster. It's also just so expensive. Okay, so costumes might be one of the things. Makeup, for sure. What else might be available to the kids? They're in a theater. Musical instruments. Microphones. Yes, I love that. Props, lights, actors, unique, different people that are in one space for one particular reason. There would also be the, playbills, the ushers, the concession staff, right? All of the tech crew. There's running the aisles. Hide and seek in that place. Can you imagine? Wouldn't it be amazing? The set. And I think the set rotates for Hamilton, so I think that that's kind of a unique, it turns, so I think that's kind of a cool thing. So what may be some of the typical routines and rituals in their home that are unique? Camera, yep. Audio equipment. We wouldn't ever think that Sebastian's family is in any way negligent, right, for taking him out of his routine. Different meals and bedtimes, Maria says, yep. Lots of dancing, dressing up. Lynn does often post he's playing cartoon songs on the piano for Sebastian to sing the intro songs to. Lots of dancing. Songwriting, thinking about yourself as a musician, right? Those are different kinds of experiences. And he probably goes to bed late on some nights. He probably sleeps in later on some mornings. And we make accommodations for families with privilege whose routines are maybe off. But could we think about how we can be flexible and unique for those families who are potentially working swing shifts, second shifts, overnight shifts, and they need time with their families and children as well. So it's a lot easier for us to be accommodating for a kiddo like Sebastian, but what can we learn from Sebastian that we can take into the rest of our work? Maintain the same environment as is typical in the home. So you know where I'm going with this, right? If the TV is on when we are not there, if the family is tethered to their phone or their screens when we are not there, we must be creative about how we use those parts of the family routine to support relationship building and bonding. I know that this can be a difficult thing for some of us. We want to ask them to turn it off or put it down, and you can do that. Absolutely you can. However, you must also know that it will be back on or back in hand when you leave. So we have to consider our goals. And who are we here to serve? Ourselves or our families? This little guy is Cooper. He watches a lot of sports on TV with his dad. He has since he was a baby because sports, basketball in particular, and yes, I know this is a football picture, are very important in his family. So here's Cooper honoring the flag at the beginning of a football game. Cooper and his dad also play basketball together in the house, in the driveway, in the gym, in Allen Fieldhouse. I'm a Jayhawk, so of course I had to include that picture. Side note though, the picture on the left was taken on my 40th birthday. We can and should use screen time to create shared opportunities in families. How can we use what kids are watching to encourage playfulness and bonding and teaching opportunities? Have you had a success in helping support families in using screen time as an opportunity for bonding? If so, share it with us in the chat. Yeah, he's very big on the pledge. He never misses the pledge, and then he always says, take it to the locker room when the pledge is over. Any other ideas on how to use screen time for bonding? Here's another example. I do play therapy with older kiddos in my private practice and include media a lot. Watching with the child, right, which is getting at kind of where I'm going with this next. This is my brother and my 2-year-old nephew and their dog Lucky. Sound effects to promote imitation, yes, absolutely. Are there ways in which we can be flexible in the ways in which we encourage play and attachment and skill development? So everyone in this little family dynamic is included, right? Everyone has their capes. Everybody is a different PJ Masks character, using favorite TV characters in other play. So it helps young children build play schemas that they can grow from and adapt and modify, right? It gives opportunities for everyone to be involved, watching music and singing along. There's also lots of places on YouTube where theme songs have been reworked for different audiences that can be fun for kids to compare and contrast. Interactive apps on the iPad that encourage families to play with them together. Sound effects to promote imitation. For the longest time, we were under the impression that screen time was something families could and would and should limit. I agree with the American Association of Pediatrics that screen time before 2 is not beneficial to learners. However, we know that our families are using screens, and so we have to be willing to meet them where they are, and I know that that's really uncomfortable, but we have to prepare them for the world that they live in and to help families support the work that they're doing. I'm going to move my computer closer to me, Cheryl. Let me know if you can't hear me. And then we have this key ingredient of honoring and accepting family routines and priorities. This can also be challenging for us as providers. If we ask families to fundamentally change how their day flows or how their routines flow, it's unlikely that they can maintain it. We ask them to talk us through a typical day and areas. Oh, we are losing audio.
I think that might be individual situations.
Okay. Okay, great. I didn't want to like be talking to myself.
Before you go any further, let me just share real quick that with the webinar environment, you can occasionally experience an audio delay. So if you look next to your name and you've got an icon next to it and it's got 2 little orange dots, that means your audio is about 2 to 5 seconds delayed. If you have an icon next to your name and it's got 3 dots, then your audio is anywhere from 5 to 15 seconds delayed. But no worries, the audio will catch up. Jen will sound like a chipmunk for just a little bit, and then it'll all catch up, so you won't miss anything that she says. It'll just be sped up for just a moment. So I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody's having some audio delays.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I wasn't aware of that. So when we meet with families initially and we're talking with them, we ask them to talk us through a typical day. We ask them to talk with us about areas or times or parts of the routine that may be difficult or where they feel their child may not be fully included and how we can support their family. It's not our image of the final product on Cupcake Wars, but it's the family as it is now, flaws and all, and they tell us those things, and they trust us to see the opportunities that are available within that to support them. This is my daughter, Maylee. Maylee is a twin, and she and her sister Breck are now 9 years old, although their birthday is coming up, so they're quickly reminding me that double digits are right around the corner. When Maylee was an infant, she had pretty extensive issues with feeding and low muscle tone. So I self-referred her to our local early intervention provider because I felt strongly that my emotional connection with her was clouding my clinical judgment about her development. So I'm also an EI mom. As we were introducing more texture and working toward getting Maylee to use her mouth and tongue to move food around, the OT supporting us suggested giving her a level 2 chicken baby food. When I explained that we are vegetarians, she said, "Oh, Jen, she's little. She won't know what it is." And it was a moment for me in reminding me that it is okay for families' priorities about their children and child rearing to be different than our own. I support families who feed their children meat. I'm 100% on board with your decisions, and honoring and accepting those priorities are a critical component of family-centered practices. And it can be hard, particularly when you feel so strongly about something. It recently came up in a session when we were talking about this that families, providers were really clear that they don't support co-sleeping because of the research. And a lot of families co-sleep. And if we are in any way not supporting families, they learn to not be honest with us, right? And it can be really difficult to support families meaningfully if we don't have that trusting, honest relationship that's so important. Snacking can be another routine that may be a struggle for us to honor and accept. Anybody, tell me in the chat box if you have worked with kids before on trying to get them to put the goldfish down or the Cheerios down. Providers often ask me how to help families move away from the grazing or constant snacking, how to help toddlers put down their snack traps or their goldfish for a little while in order to engage them in something else. But this also usually comes from our personal beliefs that family time is, meal time is important, that if kids eat too much snacking on wasteful carbs throughout the day, they may not have the same appetite for a healthy meal, and that it's setting the child up for potentially bad habits moving forward. So, but this is an area I encourage you to do some work on honoring families' priorities and routines. Similarly to screen time, if we ask for children to go snack-free during our time with them, we're changing the typical environment that the child and the family engage in when we are not there. Why does the snacking bother you? Is it a priority the family has expressed wanting support with, or is it just annoying? Liz says it's mostly avoidance behavior. And yeah, if the parents are also constantly snacking. I remember as a young mom of twins that I never left anywhere without some snack traps with some goldfish and some Cheerios because it just helped everything go more smoothly, to be honest. But I've talked to a lot of people who feel as though kids are walking around with food in their hand far too often. So what questions do you have for me before we go on to our last word? And my favorite word.
All right. While we're waiting on folks to be typing any questions, we are hearing some folks are saying that they've got some background noise. I honestly don't know what that is because, Jen, you're in your office kind of on your own, right? So.
Yeah, it's not coming from me.
If you are dialing in for your audio, I would suggest hanging up and dialing back in. Otherwise, I'm not really certain what other troubleshooting I can do for you because I don't think it's a system wide. I think it's just your perhaps your individual login. So. In the meantime, I'm sorry, Leanne, I wish I could help you better there. I don't see any other questions being typed, though. Maybe Carol, it looks like Carol might be typing something, but otherwise I'm not seeing any questions popping up in the chat box. So I think we can go ahead and keep going.
Sweet. So, which leads to my third and final favorite word of the family-centered practices definition, unbiased. Unbiased is my favorite word. So we're going to start with this question. Where do you keep your peanut butter? Type in chat, where do you keep your peanut butter? In the pantry. Cabinet, pantry, pantry. Lazy Susan, fridge, in my belly. Top of fridge. Fridge, cupboard, pantry. Your boyfriend is in the fridge, Jennifer? Pantry, cabinet. If you have peanut butter, you might be a peanut-free house. Pantry and then the fridge after it's opened. Yes, almond butter too. That counts. We're inclusive here. All nut butters. Where do you keep your nut butters? So we have counter. Lisa, tell us more about that. Do you keep it on the counter next to your toaster? Yep, okay. I've heard that too from another friend. You got to keep it right where you need it, right? Did you know that, yes, exactly. Did you know that there are so many different places that people keep their peanut butter? When I have this conversation, people are always like, wait, why would you put it anywhere except for the place that I put it? It only makes sense to put it in the place where I put it. Mine is in the fridge. I think us fridge people are kind of alone in this. We are usually the least represented in the nut butter pantry. People keep their peanut butter in a lot of different places because they use it in different ways and they have different access. And that is just sort of an example of the way that our biases inform our practice. So I think everyone should they obviously keep their peanut butter in their refrigerator because that's where I keep my peanut butter. But as it turns out, that's not where everyone keeps their peanut butter. In fact, people keep them all over the place, like on the counter, in a Lazy Susan, in the pantry, in the cupboard, on top of the fridge, all of these different places where we keep our peanut butter. So if my bias about where peanut butter belongs is non-negotiable, then I'm going to be convinced that you all are doing it wrong. So when we talk about biases and beliefs, I'm going to give you a second to orient to this definition. This definition comes from the Irving Harris Foundation Professional Development Network Tenets Working Group. And it kind of provides us with a framework for the conversation we've been having today. If we think back to Leo and the potty training, that whole idea is kind of rooted in ableism, right? The idea that everybody, regardless of all of their additional factors and context, should be potty trained by the time they're 3. That may or may not be true for Leo. He experiences some significant developmental delays. So imposing that upon him is an ableist construct. This is work we must all be engaged in on an ongoing basis. We must continue to challenge our own culture, our own values and beliefs, and how they are shaping and informing our interactions with families. There's lots of different ways to do things. Your way is only one way. Like me putting my peanut butter in the refrigerator. You have your way. I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it just does not exist. So when we look back at our recipe, how did we do? Do you think we have a unicorn cake? My daughter wanted this cake for her 13th birthday. She asked me to make it for her. She did not want me to, contract that. She wanted me to do it myself. I didn't exactly come close to replicating it despite practicing, trying different ingredients. I watched YouTube videos. Y'all, I bought sprinkles off the internet and a sprinkle blower. Did you know that was a thing? The girls at the party were so generous, telling me how perfect and delicious it was, despite the fact that this is what it looked like. In order to be truly family-centered, we have to believe families are perfect and delicious just as they are, and that we are there to add the supports that strengthen what is already there. Extending our visits into the daily routines of the family means we have to meet them where they are, not where we want them to be, and build toward their goals with them. Maria says my cake looks good. I was very disappointed in it. What questions do you have for me?
I'm also wondering if folks have any of their own experiences they'd like to share about all the different uniqueness of the families that you're working with.
Ways that you have had to stretch beyond your personal beliefs to really meet families where they are. This would be an opportunity for you to tell us about that. I always think about a family I had that when I went to their home, they had a whole spread of food for me and a rack of lamb, many things with meat, and like I said, I haven't eaten meat in 20 years, and I was sort of trying to figure out how do I create opportunities for us to partner and work together and support each other, but also not eat this, right? And I finally just said to the mom, I was like, actually, and I was explaining it to her, and she said, oh, I have a whole bunch of things that I can get for you. And so she ended up making me a plate of food that was all vegetarian, which obviously I felt bad asking her to do, but it was a great opportunity for us to find compromise together. Have you had experiences or examples like that? Okay, Liz says, what about parents that ask what they should do? But as a therapist, I know they aren't there yet. That the child should do is what I think you're talking about. And that's such a powerful question because so many of our families have siblings, friends, peers that they're looking at for developmental comparison. And that tendency is very it's very seductive, right? It can be very compelling to say, oh, we're not doing that yet. Why not? When should he be doing that? And I think a big part of that is to talk about the wide range of normal, that development happens in a trajectory, in a sequence that we can anticipate, but that there's a wide range of when is it normal for a child to do certain things, or when is that typically going to happen. I also think it's helpful when we talk about first then. So if we're asking, like I did with Maylee when she was 4 months old, I said I was doing a statewide training with IFSP providers on moving toward the coaching model. And then I said to my provider, as we were writing the IFSP, I just want her to walk. And she was 4 months old. And my provider was really great because she said, well, first, and talk to me through the developmental sequence, and I think that was really helpful for me. I knew that, but I needed her to tell me about that. I don't know if that's helpful, Liz. Siblings were in the same area, so I included everyone in activities that they were used to doing things together. And I think it's really important that we model that and that we include kids and families into our sessions, because much of what we're doing is coaching all of them, right? Coaching their family dynamic. That might be grandma, that might be the neighbor that babysits or dog sits. Anybody who's involved with this little one can be included in helping us to think about how we can use our routines and all of our resources to help support that child's development. Absolutely. Any other questions? Some guidelines on typical developmental expectations should always emphasize that we are looking at each tiny step the child takes. That's exactly right. We're all developing on our own trajectory, right? And so we set goals that we can make reasonable progress to meeting. And it's important that we don't necessarily think about and comparing ourselves to all the children that are 2, but really thinking about growth on my own scale. In what ways am I making moves toward meeting the goals? And that is really important too, to keep families reminded of what it is they're working on specific to their child's development. There's such a wide range of needs, and those expectations have to be individualized, like we talked about earlier. You're exactly right.
You know, Jen, I was thinking when you were giving your analogy of the 2 different experiences that you had with the analogy about the fruit and the dessert, and how, you know, I mean, and I forget the name of the person that was like, no, fruit pie, that's a dessert. But, you know, how easy it is for us to have our biases about what should be a particular way, and, you know, and how even those little things that, you know, we think are typical and normal for everybody, that we just assume are going to be across the board, and then they're not. So, you know, the fruit pie, the peanut butter, all of those things, that it's not just the big approaches that we take, but it's also those minute approaches that we also have to be aware that we have our own biases on. And that was like a light bulb moment for me.
And I think it's really important, I really appreciate that, because I think it's really important for us to kind of engage in getting uncomfortable. So continue to ask questions of people that help you see that lots of different families have lots of different routines, including your friends and family members, right? So the little guy that I showed you in the PJ Masks costume, that's my brother's youngest. But he is 2, and he has a 20-year-old, 18-year-old, 14-year-old, and 11-year-old siblings. So his childhood and his family looks very different than my family, for instance. So all of those factors kind of factor together and create unique situations, unique opportunities. He's a different kid with those big siblings than their oldest was, right? And parenting him is different 20 years later. So there's all of those kinds of things. Barb says, I would like to know how many therapists go to visits without a toy bag. I remember, Barb, when I let go of my toy bag, and I remember feeling like it was so cute. It had my name monogrammed on it. I just loved it. And I remember when I was like, all right, I'm going out there without my toy bag, and then I felt free, and I felt lighter, and I felt more engaged with my families. It definitely was a shift for me in my provision. So we've got 2. Raise your hand if you go to visits with no toy bag. 3.
We've got a few people. So we've got a lot of mix of different providers in here. So, but you know, it'd be interesting for those of you who, you know, if you can still recall your very first time and when you decided, okay, this is it, I'm going to do it. What did you have? Like, what was your experience? So Jen, I don't know if you see Liz is asking a question. You like, how do you set that up?
So the way that I have always framed it is by thinking about what my objectives are. What are we working on in our time together? right? That's kind of how I planned for my visit. So I try to think about, okay, what are the things that we want to get done today, or how are the ways in which I want to support this family today? And then when you go, you have a sense of, I would always ask kind of what was happening in the child's day. So what is the time of the routine that's happening? I don't want to go into your home and have you say, okay, we're sitting in the living room right now. If it's playtime, okay, how would you play with him or her? How would you be engaging? If I weren't here, what would be happening? And then joining into that routine. That's kind of the first step, is really saying, like, pretend like I'm not here. What would that look at? Tiffany says it's difficult to do if you don't joint plan with the family based upon their routines, which I think is exactly what I was trying to say. So thinking about what are the routines that a family is engaged in and the time your visit is scheduled, and in what ways can you support the child's development within those routines. And that in and of itself is kind of, that is the learning and the teaching opportunity, because when you're not there, those are the things the family can incorporate. And I know many, many of you have done this with diaper changing, just as a simple example, right, where you talk with the family about how you use language and singing and rhyming and lots of different opportunities, body parts during diaper changing. I know you guys are doing that. So that's an example of a routines-based intervention that doesn't require a toy bag. And Patricia, I really appreciate how you're framing that as a security for yourself that helps you to think about how you're feeling, like you're ready for your visit and you're presenting as the professional. And I think that's a really important thing to come to terms with, is how we view ourselves as professionals. That's why many, many people hold on to their toy bags, because it feels like you're going to work when you have materials. So asking the parent, what would you be doing if I weren't here right now? What would be happening in your family? Can I join you in doing that? Is that helpful? And that's a big shift. If you're planning your lessons around, I remember, guys, when I was working in early intervention, going into my colleagues' offices, going to garage sales on the weekends, I loved toys. And I was always thinking about what toys I needed to introduce a different child to each visit. And I now know that the most important thing is to engage families in ways that they can continue doing when I'm not there. So it's not about the toy in and of itself, right? It's about the engagement, the learning opportunity, the experience that the family has together, rather than the toy in and of itself, or the skill. I think that's a fair statement that Liz has made, that she might be thinking about starting that with a new family, since right now your current families are probably expecting all of your cool toys, right? And I also remember having a family that bought everything I ever brought out, and that is a really important thing to be acknowledging as well, to say, oh, this isn't actually what it is, right? It's all about playfulness. Tiffany says, families don't play 24/7. Do families play 1/7? The toys aren't the magic, right? Exactly. So how do we engage them in that relationship building, in the playfulness, in the language, in the routines they're already doing? Life isn't all about just playing with toys. We have a lot of things to do. So if a mom says to you, I would actually be folding laundry if you weren't here, but I'm not obviously going to do that because you're here, I would say, okay, then let's fold laundry. Let's do it. So there's lots of opportunities for us to think.
I have a question that I'm going to put out here, and it's probably one that you haven't anticipated, so I apologize in advance. But we have a lot of service coordinators on our webinar today, and so they're not actually going out and providing direct service with families, but they are going out and providing the supports and coordination of services and all of that. So when they are meeting with families during intake and discussing what early intervention is all about and what families can expect, what would be a way that they could share the myriad of different approaches that providers might take to kind of help prepare families that everyone's going to, do this a little bit differently?
That's such a great question. I think one of the ways that we can sort of set up providers to have successful relationships with their families right from the beginning is to say that the families, everyone in the family, anyone who's home is there to participate in our time together. So anybody who wants to or is available to is included, and that way it doesn't feel like, oh, we have therapy at 3, right, and I need to get the siblings in front of a movie and make sure that we have the living room all ready so that we can sit down for therapy. If we don't frame it like it's the provider, and I know that it's different with speech therapists and I know it's different with physical therapists who are doing much more like hands-on work with families, although both of those professional organizations as well as OT is moving toward the coaching model as well. So all of those things are thinking about how can the family, what are the family's needs, and how can the providers as a team best support that family in meeting their goals? All of those things require family involvement. And like the Wood County EI team has said, that service coordination shares that it is family focused, right? It's not just child focused. And so setting that up front, when we show up with all the toys and materials, that's setting the stage for families. If we didn't, if we came and said, okay, tell me what you would be doing right now if I weren't here, I would like to enter into that with you, that would set that stage. That would become our norm. And we could talk through some things like how bedtime routines are going, how sleep's going, some of the things that we can't necessarily be there for, but we establish ourselves right from the beginning as being partners in problem solving and partners in thinking through opportunities for families to engage in language development, in playfulness, in bonding, in attachment, in all of those ways. Chris says, so when the child is taking a bath, it's singing, this is the way we wash your leg. Exactly. You don't need toys, but it's building vocabulary. The caregivers are giving baths most days, right? They're bathing their children, so we're modeling for them how to engage. And those narratives, as well as the turn-taking in language, right? Teaching, a lot of times families might not have an understanding that if they wait, their child will imitate, will respond, will provide some feedback, and then that is a cue for them to talk some more. Sometimes families don't have that awareness, they don't have that child development knowledge, so we can provide them with that coaching right in the moment. Oh, look, he's talking back to you. And then you have the opportunity to continue the loop with families. So I think all of those things kind of help families to grow their skill set and use those skills when we're not there. Lori says, I've tried to help people with routines. Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be hard for families to want to, if they're struggling with their children in public, it can be hard for them to want to share that experience with us, right? At home, it's maybe a little bit more controlled once they're used to having you in their space. Then they can kind of anticipate that. But if you go out in public, they might not want you to see how things go, or they might feel self-conscious. So part of that, I think, is really developing those relationships and being able to say, what would help? What would helping look like? What would an experience at the library that was a positive one look like, and how is that different from what you've done now? So planning in advance, I think, is really important, and talking it through in advance so that they can have a sense of what you're there to do and how you might be helping them. As parents, we just often, have that feeling of being judged, so the partnership is super important. Melissa says, as a service coordinator, I use the analogy for toilet training when explaining how EI will be helpful. Therapists will give you strategies and tips on how to implement these activities in your daily life. You wouldn't just potty train for 1 hour a week in one place. Exactly. That's exactly right. So how do we help you? And that really forces families to think about the areas in which they're really struggling, or the areas in which they may not think there can be improvement, right? And if we talk about those things, because oftentimes with infants and toddlers, people feel like that's just a hard time in life. Infants and toddlers are hard. They don't sleep. They don't, have routines. They don't, and this is an opportunity for us to help families to say, okay, what part of this is really providing you with a lot of stress, and how can we maybe help with that? We don't have family coaches and parenting coaches in our culture and in our society. We don't have any parenting support really available. And so you're on the front lines of supporting families and gaining all of the skills that they will need to help develop those relationships with their little ones. And service coordinators can help connect them to that. By setting the stage, and somebody said it earlier, like starting without a toy bag with a new family might help their transition to leave the toys at home, and I definitely encourage that. And remember, if you're bringing toys, one of two things is going to happen. One is that therapy ends when you leave, quote unquote, and there's no more work happening when you're not there. Or two, they go out and buy all of those toys because they think that the progress is in the materials and not already in their home and in their capacity as parents and families to provide. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I don't know if you saw, Patricia had one comment up there right above Lori's.
Yeah. I just scrolled up to that. Okay. I think that, Patricia, your question about, she says, since there are several children needing assistance and attention from the present caregivers at a daycare center, how do you feel the coaching approach works in that situation? And I think that is a really excellent question, because there's a couple of things happening there, right? Like, one is that there are multiple and unique needs all in one space. And so meeting unique needs for multiple people is always going to be challenging. The second is that what we know about child care providers is that they often have very little support in improving their skills. And so the coaching opportunity is so important in that setting because it provides the opportunity for better care for all of the learners in that classroom and those that will come. It's an opportunity for professional development and encouraging. I really love that whatever center this is, that they are receiving and supporting kiddos who have developmental delays in the daycare setting, because I know just that can be a challenge. But the coaching opportunity is providing some professional development for the providers that will go well beyond the needs of the children that are currently needing assistance and attention. The other thing is really talking, I think, about how to make sure that the ratios are appropriate for kids who have advanced needs. So if you have a typical toddler setting with a typical 1 to 8, say, ratio, is that still an appropriate setting if you have kids who have identified disabilities or more significant delays? So if we go back to Leo, one of the compromises is that they will put a changing table in the 3-year-old room, but they're also going to have to provide more of a floater to be in that room more often, so that when diaper changes are happening, there is somebody there that can help support for those longer potty breaks, essentially. So the resources part, I think, is really a critical component, and we can't not consider that resources are a factor. Oh, good. I'm glad.
I just want to throw this picture back up again of the cake. And again, just remind folks that it's still a cake, and it's still yummy, and it doesn't have to look exactly like what we envisioned in our initial view, that it still is going to work and do what it needs to do. So I think I want to go ahead and take this opportunity, Jen. I don't see any other questions. So I think we can probably wrap up. I want to thank you for a great presentation, and for sharing your strategies and information, and I love the recipe. And it really does provide an opportunity for us to kind of think about what some of our biases are that we really do have, that are those minute biases as well. Everyone else, I want to thank you for participating, and I hope you found this webinar to be informative for you. Just a reminder that we will have another webinar Wednesday next week? Let me look real quick. Don't want to give you wrong information. So yes, we'll be having another webinar next Wednesday at 6. So please, if you haven't registered, please do so. And with that being said, I want to remind you that you will be getting your survey in the mail, in the email, And if you haven't received it, please contact the training program so you can get that. But if you didn't register, you won't get one. So complete the survey, you'll get your certificate of attendance, and I just want to thank everyone again for participating. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and we will see you next time. Thank you.